Okay, let's see if we can get this fixed now. Hey everyone, welcome to Savage Goose. My name's Goose. This is the show where we do everything that's going on the past week when it comes to Savage Worlds. This is my second attempt to try to live stream because something happened with StreamYard where it just kind of cut out and stopped letting me actually stream. So hopefully this will fix itself. Let's go ahead and just get this shared there. So yeah, hopefully everything's fixed now and we can kind of jump into everything. And I'm just going to kind of take from the top. So talking about the news this week, there isn't a whole lot of news to actually discuss. A lot of the stuff that was in the newsletter this week is going to be in the rest of the content that we talk about the rest of the day. So that's not anything we have to be super concerned about. So we're just going to dive in and kind of talk about everything else that's going on. And so yeah, the first thing is there's a Savage Pathfinder sale. For the month of November, you can get 30% off all physical and PDF products from Pinnacle's website. There's a link down below if you want to see all the products that are available for Savage Pathfinder. The only exceptions are the Advanced Player's Guide 2 and the Bestiary 2, which are haven't been even sent out yet to people. I think we have the PDFs already for them, but they haven't been sent out yet for the physical releases yet. So they tend to kind of wait for those kind of things till later. So if you are interested in getting into Savage Pathfinder or trying to pick up a few books you haven't gotten yet, check out the sale. It's a good opportunity to get that. Today, Rifts Europa started. The Kickstarter for Rifts Europa. If you're here, that means you're actually not over at Pinnacle's website, at Pinnacle's YouTube channel and their Twitch channels and whatever, watching the current live stream about Rifts Europa for opening day. This is the first day for the Kickstarter, so if you want to go check that out, if you're into Rifts, go check that out. I'm personally not a huge Rifts person. I just haven't gotten a chance to get into it, really. I've got the books from Deluxe Edition that went for the original, like the first Rifts Kickstarter, but just haven't really, wasn't something like super jived with me. But I'm sure that a lot of other people are like it as well. I know a lot of people like it because it's one of the most popular settings in Savage Worlds. So if you're interested in Rifts, though, go and check that out. And yeah, it's over there. There's a link down below to the Kickstarter. Coming next year, The Secret World for North America. So The Secret World is a tabletop role-playing game. Originally it was a massively multi-online role-playing game. You can still play it through Steam. And the people over at Star Anvil Studios did a Kickstarter to do the Secret World as an RPG, first for 5th edition and then also for Savage Worlds. I actually have my copy right here. This is my copy of The Secret World for Savage Worlds. So SW for SW. This is my print-on-demand copy I got through Kickstarter through DriveThruRPG. It's like about 200 pages, so you can play the game inside Savage Worlds. And then next year, they plan doing a supplement, an expansion to the game, to the RPG for The Secret World for North America. So that'll be another supplement to the game that you can get. There is a link down below to the back, like the notification, so you can get notified about it. And there should be one for all of these actually as well. Coming soon, I'm sure I missed something. I missed one. Oh, okay. Coming soon, this will be from Tabletop Games. I don't know the exact date when this is coming yet, but Monster Truckers Long Haul into the Worst Lands. From the brief description I've gotten from Paul over at Tabletop Games is that this is going to be a game where you play as truckers who are some of the more classic monsters like werewolves and vampires and mummies, and you're all truckers. I don't know fully entirely yet what's going to be like, that's all going to entail, but kind of it sounds pretty fun. I'm imagining some sort of like who's the character? I said maybe this earlier, like Jack Burton, I think that's his name, from Big Trouble in Little China, as a trucker, and like maybe it's like a werewolf trucker. Sounds pretty fun. But right now I'm more excited from Tabletop Games is getting my hands on those copies of Street Wolves. So, but if you're interested in this, check out the link down below to be able to sign up for the notification that the Kickstarter is happening. Also coming next year from Vermilium is the Sick and the Dead adventure for the Vermilion setting. Again, I have the Vermilion core rulebook right here. This is one of the favorite settings I've read. I haven't had a chance to play it yet, but I really want to, but it's a matter of just finding the time, right? I have so many settings that I want to play. In fact, of all the settings up here, I've only played a handful of them, like not enough of them. But this one is one of the third-party products that I am the most intrigued by, which is why it is the monthly Ace Swag Licensee Spotlight. Yes, I was doing this weekly. I decided I'm going to move to monthly because I feel like I might run out of things to talk about if I do it weekly fairly quickly. Monthly should mean that I should have plenty of things I want to mention and talk about. But we're going to kind of keep this monthly as a like, hey, this is the one I want to talk about. So Vermilium, it is an amazing setting, and I think one of my plans is to talk about the like different things I like about the settings, like once a week. It'll be like different things each week. So kind of talking about this one, it's going to be, I'm going to start with the lore. The lore is super interesting. If you look at like the map, it looks a lot like North and South America as being some sort of uh, like modified version of North and South America. At least that's the impression my friends and I got, but we always look at maps and go, oh, that's clear. That's this. Even if it's not the intention of the author. So if it's not, apologies. But the fun part of this is though is that like in the lore you have like the people from essentially like Europe kind of coming over and immigrating into the new world. But the cool part about the new world is that there is there's this like destroyed civilization that's under all of the foliage and the woods and everything. Like everything's been overgrown over it, but there is this old civilization underneath it. Kind of remind me of like I think it's called like the Shannara Chronicles and things like that, where it's like technically it's post-apocalyptic. It's not post-apocalyptic in a sense, in that same sense where it's like modern day, our world today to take over. It's much more of like a clockwork type thing. It kind of reminds me of the Dwarmer Society. This is just like me trying to find things that I know from my own cultural reference points to kind of point to. Because it's not these things, but it's the kind of things I'm like pulling all together. But this old world kind of reminds me of like the clockwork type stuff that were in Dwarmer societies inside of Skyrim. If you're familiar with those. There are clockwork robots. There's other kind of like different kind of like robots that aren't like magically powered and stuff that you can like face off against. And there's also like, a lot of like cool lore about different kind of races you can encounter. There's different kinds of dwarves and elves, and each of them are definitely and halflings too, and they're all very different than what we probably typically think of when we think of dwarves and elves. When it comes to like Golarian in for Pathfinder or Forgotten Realms, all the races work very differently than those. They're much more tribal, much more have a lot more different opinions about what things are. So the lore of this book is just really cool, and it's just accentuated amazingly with the amazing art in it. One of the other things I love about this book is just how well I think the layout's been done, and how pretty the art is, and how much the art really just kind of gives a consistent feel for what the game is going to be like. Just here's some like full art spreads here. I only have so much I can give and show, but if you're interested at all, there is a quick start or a jump start down below. A link to that from the Drive Through RPG, so you can get a taste for what the game is like, and get a feel for what it feels like, and then you can print out the character sheets, play the pre-gen. There's pre-gen character sheets. There is a adventure. There's some other rules. Go check out this game. It just looks so cool. So we'll talk about some other things next week, and I'm going to keep kind of focusing on Vermilium for the next this month, and then we'll kind of move on to something else I can kind of focus on. I will come back to City Guard Chronicles. You guys know I will, because I love City Guard Chronicles, but because they didn't get that full month. But I want to at least kind of focus on Vermilion for now and how amazing it is, and excited for the Kickstarter. So today's topic is the 4 dials of monster difficulty. This is inspired by an article written by Mike Shea. I don't know if I had a chance to put the description in the new version of this live stream. I did. Okay. There's a link down below to the original article. He also did a episode on his talk show that I'll be honest, I kind of really inspired a part of this talk show from his talk show for D&D and just kind of generic tabletop role-playing games and stuff. So I listened to a lot of him. I listened to him this morning, actually, on my way to work. So bear that all in mind. But he did do an episode where he talked about these 4 dials of monster difficulty inside of D&D. That's the game that he plays. He plays a lot of 5e, not just like the WotC version, but also like Tales of the Valiant, Shadow Dark. He talks a lot about Shadow Dark, and some of the other a level up 5. I think it's like level up advanced 5e. All the other different 5e variants that he's tried and played and uses for his games. And one of the things I really admire about him is that he does focus on saying, like, this is your game. You can do what you want. You don't have to feel like you are stuck to doing certain things. even though, and really kind of encouraging that a game doesn't have to be what the main people that make the game is. So 5e is not necessarily anymore. 5e is the system that maybe it was originally produced by Wizards of the Coast, but it's not their game. It's our game. We make it the game what we want to be. If you want to use third-party products, you can. In Savage Worlds, we have the same thing. We have some amazing third-party products, and we can. I've seen some really cool things that are being done by people outside of Pinnacle in their products that they make for Savage Worlds. I've seen there's the fundraiser little piece. I can't remember what it's called. The fundraiser supplement from the Central Adventurers Guild that goes over different ways to use bennies. And there's one that was about like I can't remember. It was something about like going crazy and stuff, like basically seeing the world for what it is. That was really cool. There's some really cool things that we can do. Point being, though, is that this was an idea he had for adjusting difficulty of monsters in 5e, and I want to talk about that in relation to how we could do the same sort of thing in Savage Worlds. That we, as game masters, if you are a game master, are not stuck to using the stat blocks as they are. We can adjust them as we see fit, not just in part of our game prep, but even maybe as kind of things go on. Maybe we want to change encounters as the game is going on, and we need to either dial things down or dial things up. And so we're going to talk about these dials and what they are, and how we can adapt them for Savage Worlds. So before we kind of dive into that, though, I do want to give some kind of like premise, like warnings, and kind of say a few things about this before we kind of really dive into this. And the first thing is that D&D combat is not Savage Worlds combat. D&D combat and Savage Worlds combat is extremely different. At least, I mean, there's definitely the feeling of hit, roll to hit, take the attack action, roll to hit, resolve, repeat. But I think a lot of times we need to get away from that. So first, want to get away from that. But also just that Savage combat is just very different because there's not hit points. You're not whittling down hit points. Just because you hit doesn't mean you actually do anything. There's a possibility where you whiff on your damage rolls, which I know some people don't like, but it's part of the game and it's part of the way things work. So, that being said, though, point being is that they are built differently. Savage Worlds is built with different combat goals and pacing. D&D combat, it tends towards longer fights where you have to try to do more damage and trying to make sure that things get done quickly, but also it's still going to take a while. And a lot more is focused on balance encounters. Savage Worlds tends to lean toward more fast-paced cinematic action, where there's less well-defined balance and there's a lot of swinginess, and there is a lot of options, a lot of tactical options. So yeah, balance just really isn't a thing, really a concept that we can fully understand and fully like grasp the way that people do in D&D. There's a lot more numbers, there's a lot more bounded accuracy in D&D, and there's a lot of expectation that all characters are going to be able to do some level of combat and damage in D&D that is not necessarily true in Savage Worlds. You can have a character that just doesn't do combat, and that's perfectly acceptable. That's a legitimate character. I like making those kind of characters personally because I like doing things, other things in Savage Worlds that doesn't have to be combat, right? So there's that being said. And so what we give these dials to GMs to control over, like these dials we're going to be talking about, are to give you as GMs control over encounter difficulty. We have to remember that also Savage Worlds does thrive in different ways, right? So Savage Worlds, a successful encounter is not necessarily it's not willing down hit points because we don't have hit points, and it's not willing down wounds. Just because you don't wound your characters, your player characters, doesn't mean that you didn't run a successful combat. A combat that was fun, made your players think. Maybe they had to spend bennies to reroll damage or reroll attacks or reroll, soak rolls. Maybe they had to spend power points to overcome things. Maybe they had to, maybe they didn't have to use different options that were not usually available to them. Maybe they had to do things that put them in a worse spot, like while attacking, or maybe they had to do some desperate attacks. There's a lot of things that can define what Savage Worlds combat looks like. That's not just did you whittle down hit points. So that is something to keep in mind as well. Savage Worlds is very much about using these dials. If you're going to use these dials, this is to make the encounters more engaging, more fun, more fast, furious fun, and encourage more dramatic moments over these like perfectly calculated circumstances. And lastly, I want to say that using these dials does not replace that you need to run your monsters smartly. Your monsters still have certain ways they're going to act, and you want to make sure that you are trying to play them the best way possible. One of the things that we are talking over at TPK 101 with Peter Saloom, if you look at those 2 episodes we have out so far, is that one of the things we kind of really emphasize that these, a lot of times the monsters your players are fighting are not dumb. You can make the combats way more interesting when you acknowledge that they're going to do things in a smart way, and trying to like overcome the players the way that you would as if you were a player, and trying to use different things to your advantage. So keep all those things in mind. And then, so again, what's the goal of having these dials in place? The goal is to maintain a dynamic challenge, a challenge that can be dialed less if it's too challenging, dialed up a little more if it needs to be more challenging. Is to help enhance storytelling and pacing. Kind of, you know, if you gotta get to the right narrative tone, you don't want to really make things too much of a slog, because then that's just like it becomes a slog, and your players are tired and they're not interested in the story. But we also want to make sure that this isn't just like, okay, you're just wasting my time, right? If you dial things down too far, you maybe should just skip the encounter, or maybe you should just work it as a quick encounter instead. So we want to use this to enhance storytelling and to enhance pacing. We want it to promote flexibility. Again, this is not just dialing things up; it can also be dialing things down. We also want to create memorable moments with our players. We want to make sure that things are fun for them, and we want to make sure that we can also keep players guessing. So I think guessing, keep players that think they know what they're talking about when it comes to like monster stats. I'm not sure if it bothers you, but sometimes it's like, that's not interesting. You think that? Guess what? I don't have to play by the book. These monsters are mine, and I can make them do whatever I want. So it helps kind of make sure that things don't become too predictable with certain monsters and stuff by adjusting these dials. So what are the dials? Well, the first dial in Mike Shea's is tuning, so dialing in the number of monsters. A lot of times we come to an encounter, we have an idea of how many monsters there should be, and maybe we find that that's not enough monsters to really challenge our players. So we can dial up, or maybe it's too many, we can dial it down. We can reduce the amount of monsters, and we can also make them maybe easier. Well, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but we can dial down the monster if you think. And again, though, if we're dialing things down to too little of monsters, we may want to consider changing what that encounter is to maybe a quick encounter, or just skipping it entirely and saying it's not relevant. But let's say we want to turn things up a little bit. How can we turn things up? If we have a boss monster, like a wild card, we're going to want to maybe throw in some more extras, right? The more extras there are, that's the more people that the players have to deal with. And the nice part about extras is that you can just, they can throw some extras in. They take 1 wound, they're out. Cool, done. You don't have to worry about it. Took up some resources. It's the players have to deal with these, maybe not an attack of those guys, because that's action economy and not necessarily focus on the big bad guy. And you can also think about giving these using the fanatic setting rule, which basically says that like if you attack the big bad guy, the extras can jump out in front of them and like save them from whatever those wounds are. So think about maybe using like things like that. You can add in like some sort of, and instead of making it like the setting rule, you can say, okay, maybe I'm going to give these extras, the fanatics, a ability that's acts like fanatics, where they're able to jump in front of this particular person, their boss. So that's one of the things you can kind of give them to make things a little bit harder. You can also send in reinforcements and say like have like waves of extra, instead of like there's being more extras in the combat originally. If you want to dial that, turn that dial in the middle of a combat, you can start having other extras from other regions nearby who would make sense to be there, to start coming in waves. After maybe like combat, like the first round or after the first 2 rounds of combat, you start seeing these other extras come into the combat to kind of help, and maybe even start flanking and gang up bonuses, and coming in behind where the casters are in the back, kind of giving that more tactical advantage there by adding in some of those monsters. Yeah, so you can also even throw in some more additional wild cards. I might be hesitant about that, because if you add like wild cards, stacking wild cards up in combat can get dangerous really quickly. Wild cards are they are dangerous. They are stronger. That's what makes them wild cards. And also you want to make sure that this kind of fits narratively. So if you have a wild card that doesn't seem that important, you may want to question if they really should be a wild card or not. So try and make that whoever that wild card is, that makes that person or that creature or whatever they are in the encounter more interesting and more important, so that actually like adds to the narrative side of our combat that we are having inside of our game. So that's the first style, and that's increasing the numbers, which is pretty straightforward, a pretty common one for us to do. Is like, okay, increase monsters. That's going to make the combat a little harder. We also need to be careful because we don't want to make it into like a slog where it's just like, okay, I just have to do more things now to kill them all, and they're too easy to kill. It's just like a waste of time, honestly. So try to balance that out a little bit. The second dial for Mike is the hit point dial. Now, in Savage Worlds, we do not have hit points. We are not whittling down hit points. We have wounds. But one of the things that we try to emphasize a lot is that or wounds are not hit points. You cannot just take these creatures and treat their wounds like hit points, because mostly like extras, they don't have hit points. They have one wound and then they're dead. So how can we adjust these dials in Savage Worlds? Well, the first thing we can do is we could look at maybe the toughness side of things. We can somehow increase toughness so that it's harder for them to take damage. Maybe we can do that through better armor. We could do that through increasing a particular monster's toughness. Through vigor die. We can increase our vigor die, which also makes it, if we do decide to do a soak roll, they can soak more easily. So that's something we can do. And that also applies to wild cards if we need to soak with wild cards. I don't usually recommend soaking for wild cards if you don't have to, just because I'd rather you just use your bennies to hit the players. But if you do need to soak to make sure the wild card does not get killed, it is important to use the bennies then. So that's one of the things we can do. But we also give creatures different abilities. I can already see in chat someone's talking about resilient. You can give extras the resilient or the very resilient edge or feature where it makes it so that extras do have wounds, which then puts them like this weird place where they're not they can take a wound. I think it's resilient. I might be thinking of a different one, but I think I'm pretty sure it's resilient. We take 1 wound or 2 wounds. Now, the one problem I have with that is that it just adds in some extra bookkeeping. Get it? Extra bookkeeping. But seriously, I don't. One of the things I like about extras is that when you hit them with a wound, they're out, and I really don't actually care for the resilient edge, just because it adds that bookkeeping aspect to extras. That I'm like, that's why the reasons I like extras, because I don't have to keep track of them. So it's just like you hit them, you wound them, cool, they're dead. So one of the other things we can do though is we can also use some other abilities like what's it, Hardy ability, which says I think it's Hardy, which says no, that's not Hardy. There's like 3 different abilities I'm thinking of right now. There's Hardy, or there's one that says that you can't take more than 1 wound at a time. I think it's Hardy. And there's the one that says that a second result doesn't shake you. Second shaking result doesn't shake you. And then there's the one that says like extras get wounds. So I apologize, I'm getting them all confused right now. I kind of had 2 of them in mind, resilient and Hardy. I'm realizing that there's a 3rd one, and now I'm not sure which one's which. But one of the ones, unstoppable. Thank you. Okay, so that's what the problem. So unstoppable is the one that says you can't get more than 1 wound at a time. And that's an ability you can give to your wild cards to help make sure that they can only take 1 wound at a time, and it really keeps them on the battlefield much longer. It kind of guarantees that they're going to be around for at least 3 hits or 4 hits without going down. Well, 3 hits and then 4th hit will go down. Hardy is the no wound from second shaking result, which you can give to extras. You can say, okay, all my extras have Hardy. You can shake them, but if you shake them twice, you're not going to get them down. And then resilient is the extra ones. Yes. So for extras. So I really personally don't like resilient, but if you feel that you can keep track of the extra wounds for extras, the extras wounds, feel free to. I just don't personally like to do that because I just don't like the extra bookkeeping. Just it's a pain in the butt. I like extras because they're simple. But you can definitely do Hardy for the second shaken ability for them, and you can also put that onto your big bads, and you can also one of the things I see a lot lately in monster design for the big bad evil guys or boss monsters is giving them the unstoppable ability, which just says you can only take 1 wound at a time. Like you can never take more than 1 wound. That does not mean that you only have to soak 1 wound though. So for example, if your big bad evil guy takes 4 wounds. If you don't want to take any wounds, you have to soak all 4 of those wounds. If you try to soak and you only soak 1, and therefore have 3 left, you then only take 1 wound. But if you want to soak, let's say you have 2 wounds and you want to soak both of those wounds, you have to succeed your vigor roll with a raise to soak both. So just kind of a caveat there to make sure people understand that. So that's one of the things that we can do to kind of like fix that. The other thing you can kind of do ahead of time, this has to be like established really early in the game, and this is going to apply to players too, is assigning some sort of wound cap, saying like, hey, no more than 4 wounds. That's going to keep the game going longer and kind of preventing like these one-shot 7 wounds and one-shot things happening. So yeah, keep that in mind. I'll do that. So the third the third dial in Mike's list of dials is the number of attacks dial. Basically saying like, hey, how many times do you get attacks? Now in Savage Worlds we have our 3 actions, right? We can say, yep, you have 3 actions, and every additional action beyond the first is a cumulative -2 to all rolls. So we can do 3 attacks for every monster if we want to. We just have to roll it at -4 for everything. Well, there's ways to mitigate that, right? So in Savage Worlds, we have our multiple actions, we have penalties, and maybe we can get rid of them in different ways. One of the ways we can do it is with the Frenzy Edge. It doesn't really get rid of the multi-attack opportunity or multi-action problem, but it does kind of allow you to do multiple attacks with single rolls. If you have Frenzy, what you do is you can roll your fighting die, and then you can roll another fighting die, and then you also roll your wild die if it's a wild card, and you get to take the higher of those 2 rolls. If you give Frenzy to a extra, which I don't see very often, but I don't see a reason why you couldn't. If you give Frenzy to an extra, they're just rolling 2 fighting dice for 1 attack, and then they are taking their highest 2. And if both of those hit, it's just 2 hits for 1 action. So you can use those as the Frenzy action as a way to kind of do multiple hits on a character. You do Approved Frenzy, which basically says you get to roll 3 fighting die, I believe, pretty sure. So there's different ways you can do that. You can also use the Sweep Edge. The Sweep Edge allows you to hit everybody in whatever your range of your weapon is in a circle around you. You roll 1 fighting die that gets compared against everybody's parry individually, and then you have to roll damage for everyone you hit. So if you give that to your extras or to your wild cards, that's a way for you to kind of increase the attack output or the hit output of your characters so that they can hit multiple times and get multiple actions. Now, when it comes to like offsetting penalties for multi-actions, one of the things you can do is you can do desperate attacks, which say they can give a +2 or +4 to your attack action. If you take a -2 or -4 to your damage, that's one way to make sure you can kind of get more hits in. And for a lot of times, it is more important to get hits in, especially for the narrative, to kind of give it so that players are worried that they're going to get hit. And also, the more times you hit, the more times you have the possibility of getting your bonuses, you have a more higher chance of getting bonuses for raises or just hitting in general, and therefore more of a chance to roll damage and ace and explode. So there's a lot of different options there. You can also do wild attack, and if you're going to wild attack once, if you're going to do like multi attacks and you're going to attack, you might as well always wild attack for all 3 of those. Because the downside for wild attack is that you become vulnerable. Well, being vulnerable is going to be, you're going to be vulnerable no matter what. You can't like stack vulnerable. You don't become vulnerable multiple times. So one of the things that some of my players do is that they become vulnerable, they'll just attack, and if it's going to last for multiple turns, they just go, okay, I'm just going to wild attack because I can't become more vulnerable, so I might as well attack. That's going to do a +2 to your hit and +2 to your damage rolls. So you're going to be able to do, which kind of leads into our next dial, which is adjusting the amount of damage. Now, going back to the amount of attacks, if you find that you actually need to turn down the attacks, you may have to remove some of these abilities, or maybe only attack once instead of multi-attack. Lately, what I've been doing with a lot of my monsters that only have 1 attack and there's no other special abilities that they have, what I'll do is I'll do a multi-attack and I'll wild attack both of them. So basically, it cancels out that -2 penalty, but at least they get 2 hits in, and they get bonus damage if they do hit. So there's something you can do there. But one of the other dials is the damage dial. Damage is a lot different in Savage Worlds because we're not chipping away hit points. There's like a certain threshold of a toughness that we are trying to hit. So we want to make sure that, and we're going to try and hit that so we can do wounds. We need shaken results. We need other result. We need raises to actually do damage and hit wounds. Usually, often players will just like spend money to unshake so they don't take that wound, or they'll want to soak it and then therefore also unshake. So there's a lot of options there. So in Savage Worlds, how can we kind of add in damage? How can we turn up the damage for a monster? For anything melee, the easiest thing for us to do is to just increase the strength of the monster. To say, okay, this monster now has a D10 strength instead of a D6 or a D8, and that's one of the easiest ways to kind of do that. The other way is kind of going back to the trying to hit in the first place, is trying to maybe give them a higher fighting die so that they can make sure they hit. Maybe they're more likely to get a raise on their hits, so they can get that extra D6 damage for the raise, and therefore that can explode. So it might be that we're trying to actually increase the possibilities of getting raises by increasing bonuses, increasing with like wild attacks, increasing how many times they hit, and increasing their fighting ability, just so that we can get those extra hits in, and then also getting those like extra damage die. Yeah, so you can increase strength, you can increase their fighting ability so you can get raises. You can also increase what kind of damage the weapon does. The thing I'm kind of like hesitant about that is because unlike games like in in D&D, I always hated that there was this thing in D&D that basically said that the weapons that monsters carried aren't good enough for adventurers, and yet they do the same damage. And I always felt that kind of cheap. I haven't seen that really in the Pathfinder Pathfinder stuff or anything from Savage Worlds, where if you want to take the monster's weapon or the monster's armor, you can, and that's legitimate. Even if it's a basic sword, it doesn't have to be a magical weapon to still be worth it. You can just take a basic sword and it's still a long sword, and you can still use it. It would be a little rusty, or if it's a goblin's dog slicer or a horse chopper, you can still technically use it, and it's still going to do something for you. It might break eventually, something like that, but you can still use that. So one of the things I'm always careful about when it comes to like increasing weapon damage is that weapon damage has to be consistent when they take the weapon. We don't want to make it like the sword that you see in a video game that like when the bad guy is using it, it's really powerful, and then you kill the bad guy and you take it for yourself, and it's like it's not that good compared to my last sword. So we want to try to avoid that. We don't want to use that kind of video game logic inside of our tabletop role-playing games, because our players will argue about it and say it's not okay. Now, due to the swingy nature of damage in Savage Worlds, we do really need to be kind of careful about this, and just kind of like remembering that the more dice that we add to the pool, the more likely they are to ace, and the more likely that we're going to do a lot of damage, and can theoretically hurt our players way more than we intended to when we increase added damage. So one of the things that like really to keep things more consistent is to increase the damage die, because they're actually less likely to explode, but they're still going to be consistently doing more damage. So it's going to be more consistent, actually less swingy, but higher damage. So that's one of the nice things about kind of increasing damage die instead of going for those races and trying to add in extra dice. You can also give similar abilities that add in damage. Thinking like if for some sort of sneaky character, you can give them sneak attack, which lets them get bonus damage in under certain circumstances, all that kind of stuff. Now, those are the 4 dials. And I'm happy to hear what everyone else has to say. I am seeing some stuff about the Fanatic setting rule. Yeah, absolutely. The Fanatic setting rule, you can see that the Fanatic setting rule is basically kind of like one of several of those dials. And I also now that I've gone through it and said it out loud, I almost wonder if there's different dials for Savage Worlds that we need to adjust. But I think that using these dials as is, you can definitely just adjust those dials using the Fanatic setting rule, or like some sort of Fanatic ability for several of these. You can use it as a way to increase a monster's wounds by letting them extra jump out in front of the big bad evil guy and take the hit instead of them. You can use it to as part of the increasing extras, or increasing how many monsters there are, that kind of stuff. So there's definitely a lot of options there. And that's kind of one of the things I want to talk about, is that these dials are mostly revolving around the idea of doing damage and that danger. But unlike D&D, I think that monsters in Savage Worlds can do way more interesting things that are not limited to just what's on their stat block. Most monsters in D&D You look at stuff like that's what they can do. There's two basic actions that everyone can technically do, but I think in Savage Worlds there's way more options that even like if you look at a commoner in Savage Worlds versus a commoner in D&D, a commoner in Savage Worlds is way more interesting, has way more abilities to actually affect a combat than in D&D. I'm currently playing a once a month D&D game, and I'm playing a character from a class called a Scholar class from the Adventures in Middle Earth book, and they don't really do attacking. They get simple weapon proficiencies. They don't really do any extra damage. The thing does extra damage. And right now, because I don't have my herbalism kit, my character can't even do the healing portion, which is like the one thing you can do, which is healing. So he's actually really useless. And when it came time for us to do a combat, I realized that I didn't really have anything I could do. I was like, I don't have a weapon because we were playing in Out of the Abyss, which you start out with no gear or anything. I couldn't like taunt them. That's not a thing that without having like a particular ability in Savage Worlds that you or in D&D. I couldn't taunt them. I couldn't perform tests. I couldn't really do support except for just taking the help action. And it was like, I help him. It's like, I don't think it's rolling dice to that. I was like, yep, I do that. Next turn. It's so frustrating. That's like the one thing I'm having a little bit of frustration about with that game. Otherwise, it's actually a lot of fun. The GM's really great. But in Savage Worlds, I feel like we are way more empowered to do way more cool things, not just as players, but as characters or NPCs and monsters from the game master side as well. We can use taunt, we can use tests, we can use support. I know that I have missed opportunities that would have been really good for me to have like a bunch of extras or several extras, try to like test somebody, make them vulnerable, maybe even shake them, and then give so my players always attack while attacking anyway, so that doesn't really matter. But giving, using support roles to like help out that particular monster attack the other person. Maybe it's like I have like a bunch of ghouls, they could use support roles to get like one really good fighting roll in. So there's a lot more options I feel like we have in Savage Worlds versus some other games that makes it so that we can have a much more dynamic and flexible game of Savage in combat encounters that really kind of adds to that. So that's what my thoughts. Thank you all for your kind of help, kind of reminding myself what we can do to kind of help our games. Again, the goal of this is not to we're not trying to promote some sort of GM versus player mentality. We're trying to make sure that we can have fun encounters for our players. I ran some encounters a couple weeks ago. As we're going through the Rise of the Rune Lords, there was an encounter that was really good. It was like a one big monster fight, and then there's an encounter afterwards with some it was like 3 ghouls. And that encounter was actually kind of lame. Actually, it was 3 ghouls, and then it was immediately followed by a 4 ghoul fight. And I wish I would have just done a quick encounter for that. Or I wish I would have spent a little more time thinking about those encounters as far as like, okay, what can I do here that's actually going to be interesting? That's going to be give them actually a challenge instead of them just like kind of walking and just taking out everybody because everyone misses. They all miss, and then my characters just one-shot them all. So these are some of those dials that we can adjust. Again, if you dial these things, a current encounter, if you're trying to dial it down further, you might want to hit a point where you just want to do a quick encounter or just skip it altogether. Keep that in mind. It might in Savage Worlds, I think it's just better. We're not trying to worry about like some sort of attrition of like removing stuff before we get to the end of the dungeon, because at least in my games, we rarely get to the end of the dungeon in a session. It might be that we start the next session with the end of the dungeon and they have all their beddings back. So we're not really that worried about that. So keep that in mind. And just kind of remember that we are playing more, I think more of a narrative game, a tactical game for sure. But I think we have much more focus on story, and we're not worried as much about hit point depletion or other resource depletion. Let me know your thoughts. I appreciate you all coming around, especially after I had some issues with the initial live stream. I'll be fixing that. I'll be like updating this live stream to make that all better. Some housekeeping. So I recently StreamYard changed their prices. So that's why you see this powered right here, this powered by StreamYard logo. And that's because the StreamYard changed the prices. So I had to cancel because it was just like way too expensive. I think I like doubled in price. And so I'm looking at some alternatives. I might be switching to Riverside FM. But one of the things I did want to mention, and then I hate doing this and hate mentioning it because it just feels a little bit wrong. If you like what I'm doing here, like what I'm doing on this channel, one of the ways you can support me is through super chats, through channel memberships. I'm still trying to figure out like what I can offer in channel memberships to, kind of return the favor to the community members. So if you have ideas, let me know. You can also do like, I think it's like gifts or like giving if you're watching like replays or other videos. But if you can't, if you're not able to do that, if you are going to be buying anything from Amazon or from RPG, you can use the links down below to different products, and I get small kickbacks from those purchases to help just kind of help pay for things. It's how I pay for book prints, like this Hellbind book, like this Vermilium book, like my After book, and all the different books that I need to get around to reviewing. I apologize, I haven't got around to them yet. And so I want to be paying for other prints like the Starbreaker book and the Sidewinder Recoil book whenever we get around to getting those through RPG and stuff. So I really appreciate all the help you can offer. I really do appreciate you guys coming out and hanging out despite the other stream going on over at PEGInc. So really do appreciate it. Looks like we actually kind of jumped up in viewers. So hi, everybody. Welcome. We started a little bit late. Great. Well, I appreciate it all, and I hope you guys have a great time. And this is a new catchphrase I'm working on, so let me know what you think. Say savage, and may you be the wild card of your own story. Cheers, everybody.